a few sort of high-level principles that I've uncovered over 35 years, spending thousands of hours one-on-one, desk side with some of the best, brightest, and busiest people in the world, both researching and implementing the methodology that's now known pretty much around the world as GTD, or getting things done. Productivity gets personal. The topic here is about how important it is for individual behavior to affect organizational success. And I work a lot with very senior executives. I work with startups. I work with entrepreneurs. And these days, you can't pretty much trust some external system to make an organization work. Sure, there's some great models out there organizationally, like Six Sigma, Agile, and other things that work with the workflow of an organization itself. But people individually, their behaviors have an awful lot to do with an organizational culture and how well it does what it does. It's over there. Voila. Here are the critical factors that I've seen that has a lot to do with especially the person at the top, because as above, so below. When I say as above, so below, in the old days where you had a much more hierarchical structure organizationally, what the person at the top did was not necessarily that important or visible to everybody else. But these days, particularly with the population coming to an event like this, you don't have a lot of levels. As a matter of fact, it's very flat. And the way that people operate is pretty transparent. And these are the critical factors that I've seen. First of all, execution. I talked to a number of venture capitalists, VCs, and they say there are three things they look for in a startup. First of all, you need intellectual property protection. Secondly, you need sufficient capital. And thirdly, you need to be able to execute. And virtually all of them say 90% of the failures are because of the lack of execution, that they're not getting done what they say they're going to get done. And not just execution for a short term, but an execution style that is sustainable, where people aren't burning out. Second factor, clarity and perspective. You're not going to follow someone who doesn't have a clear perspective on what they're doing or why they're doing it. So that clarity, that sense of I'm on top of my game, and I see the perspective of the world we're in and can basically navigate with that orientation. Very, very critical. Thirdly, responsiveness. I coached one very senior executive in a very large company whose average backlog of email was 4,000. His biggest issue was the fact that his calendar was booked for the next 2 months. Hardly anybody could get in because of his schedule. Why was his calendar booked? Because people couldn't get his input to be able to okay or get his authority to move on the things he had tasked them to do. They had to get in his face, so they needed a meeting. After I coached him, I've never seen anybody change that significantly that fast, but then his backlog went from 4,000 to 0. What happened was, he started cleaning up his backlog and keeping it clean. Then what happened was the pressure came off his calendar. Why? Because people could get a response within 24 to 48 hours by simply sending the guy an email. Huge change in his culture, simply because of his responsiveness. By the way, the sensitivity of a nervous system pretty much indicates where you are on the food chain. So organizations that do not have that kind of instant responsiveness, or people who don't have that responsiveness, basically put you further down on the food chain. And lastly, one of the key elements of any kind of leadership is trust. Do you trust that if you give somebody something to do, that it's going to happen? Do you trust that there's some integrity with how people behave? So those are the critical factors. That's nothing new to many of you, I'm sure. If you read any good business books, you're going to see that. But this is personal. In other words, people's personal ability to be able to manage these principles. Here's the biggest issue out there is that, yeah, if the world was nice and simple and showed up in a nice, neat package, it's easy to have those behaviors. But in the last 72 hours, this is pretty much what the world is like. Think about this. Any 15-minute period in your work day, what are you dealing with? The problem with the printer, the problem with a customer. You got a text from your mother. All kinds of stuff is happening just in very few minutes out there. So life doesn't show up as a pretty pink little package. It shows up like this. So we have to be able to navigate in this kind of world and surf on top of it. The most productive state is indicated by this animal. Relaxed, focused, in control, what I call a productivity ninja. At least in the US military, this state is something that they're actually training a whole lot of the military officers to be able to get to it. It's called, how situationally aware are you? How capable are you of seeing both the long term, the medium term, the short term, and to be able to sense where you need to put your focus? So that is the most productive state to operate from, right? Getting into that state requires the two things that are the core elements of self-management. Actually, organizational management as well, but particularly self-management. It comes down to two things. It's the two things this guy needs. What does this guy need besides a helicopter and prayer? The very first thing this guy had better have in his consciousness is a sense of a stable hand and foothold. If he's feeling out of control, trust me, he's not going to think about anything else. Of course, once he has a stable foothold or handhold, then what had he better do? He had better make sure he knows where the next one goes. So control and focus are actually the two elements. Anytime you think or anybody thinks they need better time management, productivity, prioritization, or organization, is simply because one of these two factors is suboptimal. Things are not feeling as in control as they need to be, or they're not feeling as focused as they should be on the right stuff. And it doesn't have to be this dramatic, though certainly in the recession years, a lot of companies felt this way. But just if you're trying to navigate a boat, what do you need? Well, I need to be able to control it. And I don't mean control like control the weather or your kids or your boss, good luck. I'm talking about having something under control, like a car or a meeting or your consciousness. So you need to be able to make sure that there's stability there so that you have room to focus on what you need to focus on, short, medium, and long term. So those are the two key elements. Now, if you think about those two elements and map them together, since I have a consulting background, you may have discovered already that consultants do not have double helixes in their DNA. They have 2x2 matrices. So any of you consultants know what I mean. Here's my favorite one. Here's my 2x2. You ready? So let's take control. None on the left, high on the right. Let's take focus or perspective. None on the bottom, high on the top. Map those together. What do you get? Bottom left quadrant. No control, no focus. Your basic victim mentality, at effect, driven by latest and loudest. Any of you ever been there? By the way, if you're not there at least 4 times a day, you're not playing a big enough game. Oh, come on, any of you ever come in early? I'm here early. I got my stacks, I got my stuff, I got my work. Yo, dude, I'm in control, focused, right. Then the phone rings. Oh, damn, somebody else is out there early. Somebody walks in, they got here early too. And you started out with focus and control, and in 3.5 minutes, you don't know how the hell to spend the rest of your day. Life's like that. You just don't want to stay there. If you stay there, then that tends to create that kind of experience, or crazy busy. Anytime you or anybody else gets into crazy busy mode, it means they're feeling out of control and unfocused. They're just trying to run faster to get off their own back. Now, oftentimes, the first approach, and probably appropriately so, if you're feeling that way, is I need to get more control. I need to get more structure. I need to get things more under control. Now, let's suppose that you decide to create structure and have high control, but no focus. Bottom right quadrant. Now what do you have? Well, now you have micromanagement. Too much structure. Oh, I know how to fix it. Let's create 14 more policies and get 3 more 3-ring binders, and let's create some more rules and more structure. Right. Then you tie yourself in your own knickers and fall right down the stairs. It's kind of hard to notice when collaboration becomes constipation. And boy, one of the toughest things you guys will ever do is get rid of policies. Oftentimes, policies are created because somebody screwed something up, and then you create a policy that hamstrings everybody else. Tough stuff. Any of you ever been there, by the way? Too much structure. Oh, come on. Any of you ever avoid writing something by getting more ready? Wait, I need to get more ready for what I'm going to do. Yeah. So then we say, well, okay, wait a minute. We need vision. We need perspective. We need somebody with a big, creative vision, risk-taking. Yeah, great. So then you hire somebody who's got a high perspective factor, but they got no control factor. Now what do you got? Now you got a crazy maker. Hey, here's another idea. Let's go do this too. And here's something else. But we can do this one. Let's go do that. Right. Any of you ever been there? One harebrained idea blows the hell out of everybody around you. Oh, come on. Some of you work for one. Some of you are married to one. Some of you are one. We've all been there. Here's the problem. In any of those 3 quadrants, you're not ready for surprise. You will over or underreact to what's coming toward you. You're not in situational awareness. Obviously, the optimal place to be is in the upper right quadrant. That's where you have the appropriate amount of focus and the appropriate amount of structure. You know, what I refer to as captain and commander. Man, you got your light touch on the helm, you got your eye on the horizon, and your gut is tied to every little single factor. You are in situational awareness, as best you need to be, and ready for whatever's coming toward you, the change in the wind, suddenly a leak in the hull. Nice place to be. So the whole idea is to be up there. Here's the problem, that once you're in this state, if you're in that state, in the captain and commander state, you're going to feel so good, so inspired, so creative, you're going to go blow the hell out of yourself again and overcreate and overcommit. I can tell you right now, one of my current clients happens to be the CEO of a unicorn. In 2010, his company was 33 million revenues, US. In 2015, it was $1 billion US. He went from 25 people 6 years ago. He's got 450 now. And this guy is one of the most creative, productive, aspirational people, and he is out of control. He's so overcreated. You know what he's done? He's the victim of his own creativity. So interestingly, this syndrome is one that when you begin to recognize that, should give you some clues about what to do. See, a lot of people say, if I had more time, then I could be in that state. Oh, come on. 24 hours, that's what everybody's got. You don't need time. How much time does it take to have a good idea? 0. How much time does it take to be creative? 0. How much time does it take to be loving and present with your kids when you tuck them in bed at night? 0. Those do not require time. They require space. If you're wrapped up around a problem, an issue, backlog of all kinds of things unhandled and not inappropriately engaged with, very difficult to have creative ideas, be innovative, or be loving and present. You need room. Oh, come on. Leonardo da Vinci had 24 hours. Mother Teresa had 24 hours. Johann Sebastian Bach had 24 hours. I know he didn't have WhatsApp, but he had 20 kids. Take your pick. You need room. How do you create room? Well, one of the things I uncovered over these 35 years in developing, really just unfolding this methodology, is that you get control with 5 stages or 5 steps. And there are 6 horizons that we have commitments, that the more clarity you have at all those 6 horizons, the more you're going to trust your judgments about what you do and your priorities. I couldn't get it any simpler than this. Those 5 steps, pretty simple, actually. I didn't make these up, I recognized them. Right? This is how you get your kitchen under control, you get your company under control, and you get your consciousness under control. It doesn't happen by itself. Any of you ever had your kitchen out of control? Anybody ever come home and look like your kitchen had been attacked? Oh my God. And you got friends coming over in an hour, and you're supposed to cook spaghetti. Oh no. What's the first thing you did besides drink or call out for dinner? First thing you did was you looked at what was not right. You identified something that's not on cruise control in that environment or ecosystem. That's you noticed what had your attention, right? Then what did you do? You decided, what does that stuff mean? Ooh, that's a dirty dish. Oh, that's a spice. Oh, that's a clean dish. Oh, that's good food. Oh, that's bad food. You clarified exactly what those things are that are not on cruise control. Then what did you do? You organized them where they go. You put dirty dishes in the dishwasher, you put good food in the fridge, etc. Once you determine what it means, you parked it where it should go. Then what did you do? You looked at the whole scene, you stepped back, reflected on the whole gestalt, looked at the time, pulled out maybe a recipe, and then you pulled out butter and started to melt it. Now that's how you get your kitchen under control, but that's also how you get your consciousness under control. If I were to sit down with you and you said, God, things are feeling, whoa, overwhelming, first thing I'm going to do, capture everything that has your attention. That takes 1 to 6 hours, by the way, for most people, just to identify what's got your mind. Then we're going to go through each one of them and decide what's the very next action step required for that thing, and what's the final outcome that you're committed to finish about it, the clarification step. Then we're going to work with you to customize, how do I keep track of the calls I need to make, the errands I need to run, the stuff I need to talk to my life partner about. Where do I put those things so that my head is not trying to do it? By the way, your head is a crappy office. Anything you're trying to manage just in your head, believe me, you will over or underreact to it if it's just there. And that's one of the things that's happened in the last 15 years since I wrote the first edition of Getting Things Done, is how much the cognitive scientists have now validated the fact that your head is for having ideas but not for holding them. As a matter of fact, if you're trying to hang on to more than 4 meaningful things in your head, you're toast. So building the external brain requires that you capture the stuff that has your attention, clarify actions and outcomes, organize the results of that in some external trusted system so that you can then step back and reflect on all of that and then decide to have a beer instead of any of it. But that's a high-performance beer. Now, I'm not voting for alcohol as a way of life. I'm just self-disclosing. I love good beer. Poland's a great place for that, I've discovered. So those 5 steps, by the way, are how we basically work with people, what we train people about. And most people, even though these are simple, have a huge improvement opportunity in terms of making sure that you externalize your commitments at multiple levels so that you can see them from where you need to see them. Then if you say, well, what about my focus? Should you even be having friends over for dinner tonight? Good question. That's where you then would need to have a conversation with yourself at these levels of horizons. I couldn't get it any simpler than this. The top level is, what's your purpose on the planet? Why are you here? What are you about? What really matters to you? What are your core values? That may be why you're having people over to dinner, because it's a friend who's going through a real problem and you want to bring them over and be of service to them. Hold their hand. That certainly could be that. The vision could be, hey, where you want to be in the long term. If your purpose was being fulfilled successfully, what would you look, sound, or feel like 5 years from now? Maybe you're having people over for dinner because you have this vision of being a great novelist, and you know somebody who is a writer. So you're inviting them over to dinner to get some motivation about where you might want to be in the long term. And then you've got a level of commitment. So what are the things I need to achieve over the next 3 to 24 months? That's the goals level there of commitment. Maybe you want to, improve your situation politically with somebody in your organization, so you're bringing over a partner or perhaps your boss and inviting them to dinner to get on their good side. Who knows? Accountabilities, those are all the things you need to maintain, like relationships, like asset management, like customer service. And then you have all the projects, all the things you need to finish about all those. And by the way, most of you have between 30 and 100 projects if you take our definition, which is something that one action won't finish that you're committed to complete. Get tires on your car, hire the assistant, launch the ad campaign, the next holiday your family's taking, those are all projects. You got about 40, 50, 60 of those. And then you have all the stuff you got to do about all those things, all the emails to send, documents you need to draft, stuff you need to talk to people about. There's a huge amount of stuff there. Most of you have, by the way, between 120 and 250 next actions right now if you were to actually objectify the inventory of all of your commitments and what you need to do about all the moving parts. It's not as simple as you think, believe me. It's a simple process, and these are simple discussions to have, but getting the right content, getting it out and getting it current and complete so that you're feeling in control and appropriately focused, that's a lifelong skill, an art and a craft of how you manage the flow of life's work. Now, some of the things that you can do quickly. It takes a while to get this as a habitual way to sort of live your life and work, but there's some things that when I coach executives, here's some of the things that they get right away that makes a big difference. First of all, they get used to making lists. A lot of them think, list making is for the low people. Oh, are you kidding? Once they determine next actions and creating lists of the next actions they need to take, huge difference it takes. Also agendas, a list of all the stuff they need to go over with people, because the more senior you get, the more you're going to get things done by interacting and engaging with people. So keeping track of what that agenda or what those topics need to be, very critical stuff. And boy, is it critical to keep track of anything anybody else is supposed to be doing you're waiting on them to produce, a waiting for list. And man, once an executive starts to see all the projects that they have and see that whole list, it absolutely changes how they spend their next week. Totally. Next action decision making a next action decision out of meeting notes and out of things like that, they start to catch that. Wow, this is really cool. And they don't let stuff stick around, in their briefcases or in their head. They make those decisions. And then they implement the 2-minute rule. Basically, any action that once you determine it, if you can finish it in 2 minutes, do it right then, because it would take you longer to organize it than to do it. Realizing that it takes at least an hour a day to stay current with new incoming stuff. If you got wall to wall and you have no white space on your calendar, you're getting behind, folks. And learning to just acknowledge that it takes time to think and make decisions about new incoming stuff to park them into your inventory and keep it current. That's a huge thing that a lot of executives really catch. It makes a huge difference. Probably the biggest need at the executive level is reflection time. So building in at least 2 hours a week where you step back and manage the forest instead of hugging the trees. Huge difference. One of the biggest needs out there is stop, don't just do something, stand there. A lot of people try to speed up if they're feeling out of control, and what you probably need to do is stop, relax, take a breath, meditate. And the integration of life and work. And for most of you in this population, probably there's no distinction. I don't have any distinction between work and personal. It's all just whatever's next. Once you have nothing on your mind, there's no difference between work and play. It's just whatever's next. If you did all that, that's what produces those kinds of principles or those kinds of behaviors and those kinds of outcomes. And that makes a huge, huge difference when someone personally begins to do that. Not only just them, but people in their organization start to do these behaviors. That moves you way up the food chain. You start then having the ability and having space to deal with the things you really need to be dealing with instead of some of these things. So let me toss it to you folks. I think if you've got some Twitter questions that have been showing up there, happy to answer and address any of those.
activity is still rather low, so it looks like you need to be inspired, or maybe we should kick you a little bit. But there are some questions. In addition, if you have a hot question now, there are 2 people with a microphone. Please walk to them, and we will have your question here on stage. Raise your hand, then they will walk to you. And in the meantime, I will take some of the questions that came through Twitter. Because, of course, you try to inspire us to improve our personal lives. What inspired you?
You know, what inspires me is actually this work that when somebody starts to implement it, absolutely improves their life and their work from then on. So, you know, it's bulletproof. So it's fabulous that now people around the world are learning this stuff, and you know, while I sleep, people are reading my book and they're getting trained by our franchise trainers out there around the world. And it, you know, what people do with space is quite unique to that individual. Some people get more creative because they have a lot of artists and movie people that love this methodology because it gives them more room to be more creative. I'm coaching the head of the World Bank right now. He's using room to be more strategic in terms of what he's doing and decisions he needs to make. And certainly more room for people just to be present and more loving and more capable of sort of being who they are. So that's fabulous. I'm absolutely blessed to have uncovered, you know, this methodology that just works to improve everything for everybody.
Thank you. Is there someone with a question? There must be. Here up front.
Maybe I was brilliantly thorough. Who knows? Or baffled everybody with my BS.
It's Polish modesty.
Hello. What's the hardest thing you ever got done, personally?
The hardest thing I ever got done was write the book, Getting Things Done. I can't tell you. It was so funny. The 4 years it took me from the time I pulled the trigger to write that book. You know, it's so funny how stressed I got writing a book about stress-free productivity. It's crazy. So, you know, writing is not my day job, and so assuming that I could actually craft, you know, 25 years of my life's work and put it into a manual and have it be at the level of quality that I needed it to be. The first thing I wrote, by the way, were the reviews. And the problem with that was it raised the bar so high that, you know, it took me 4 years to actually get it to where I felt comfortable with it. So that was a major, major event. So, yeah, hardest thing I ever did.
But you got it done.
I got it done, yeah.
Other question. There is a question in the middle.
Yes, I have a question. I have 2 questions. First, what is your favorite saying? Like a proverb? Another question is, what would you recommend to someone who has all of the lists, what to do, and is just stuck with doing?
Well, the first one, my favorite saying probably is let go and let God.
Maybe you should.
One of the best advice I've ever given myself or gotten from somebody else. And every time I remember to do that, control is the highest human addiction. So letting go and then letting a bigger thing, you know, inside of me show up is probably the best admonition I've got, for myself anyway. And what happens if you got a whole list of all the stuff to do and you're not doing any of it? Relax. You know, enjoy, have fun. You know, procrastination simply is not doing a bunch of stuff, and sometimes the thing that you need to do is stop doing anything. As a matter of fact, how good you are at this getting things done methodology is often indicated by how well you can do nothing. People have a hard time doing nothing. But we know now, in terms of brain science, that you need as much time to let your brain relax and be spontaneous and daydream in order to refresh its decision-making cognitive power. Because you only have a limit of that. And so if you're not napping, if you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not backing off and letting your mind just relax and wander, then you're sub-optimizing your cognitive abilities. So, you know, yeah. Most people procrastinate, though, because they're afraid of stepping into something you don't feel like you can be successful at. So just the simple idea of deciding what's the very next action I need to take. Oftentimes, people's lists do not have next actions. You'll see things like, on somebody's list. How many of you have something that looks like a to-do list somewhere? Anybody? Yeah, 99% of every to-do list I've ever seen is an incomplete list of still unclear stuff. You'll see things on a to-do list like mom. Oh, good. Well, there's good historical data. You probably had one. You know, why did you write it down? Oh, well, her birthday's coming. Well, great. What are you going to do about her birthday? I don't know what I'm going to do about her birthday. Right. And most people's to-do list, when you look at them, still are reminding you there's decision-making and thinking that you still need to do about these commitments, and you don't have the energy to think and decide, so you say, stop reminding me, I'm overwhelmed. So your list becomes very unattractive to you. So there's lots of reasons people may have a high barrier to entry to start engaging with the things that you're committed to. So read my book. Get some better answers.
Commercials later on. There are still 2 questions. In the back, please.
Yeah, firstly, I want to thank you for what you're saying. I think it's very useful. But, you know, many people of us have bad habits, just habits you described. How long time you think we need to implement those things that you just said to our life to make it effective? Because we have effect of, oh, wow, this is super cool, and I won't do this. But normally we go back home, we go back to office, and after 2 days we just, forget about it. So how do you think to stay with this and make it effective?
Beats me. I'd love to have a simple answer for that. It's like any kind of behavior change is sometimes tough. And frankly, you can experience the value of this immediately. How long would it take you to write down the top 10 things that are on your mind and decide the next action you need to take on each one? You can do that in 60 seconds or in 2 minutes. And I guarantee you that if you just did that exercise, get the top 10 things off your mind that are bugging you, and decide what's the very next action step, you'll feel more in control and more focused. So it doesn't take very long for you to experience high value out of these behaviors. For them to become habitual so that you don't even think about it, you just do it, 2 years. But it takes 2 years to learn the banjo, 2 years to learn Italian, 2 years to learn to cook spaghetti. I don't know how long it takes to learn to be a parent, but all of these things that are changes in terms of that, and that are really arts. This is not just a time management trick sort of thing. This is like a whole art and craft about how do you manage the flow of life's work. And I still work at it. I've been at this for 35 years, and there's still improvement I can make in terms of how much value I could produce based upon the things I'm engaged with in my life. So this is an ongoing affair. But yeah, get around people who do this, keep reminding yourself of it, like anything. Especially if you get around people who start to implement this, that's probably the best way to have it stick for you.
Last question.
Hi, I'm Wojtek, and I read your book a while ago, but I guess you came up with an idea there that if there's an incoming task that will take you less than 2 minutes, you should do it instantly. And to me, it's a perfect way to get distracted. How can you respond to that?
Well, you don't spend all day doing 2-minute stuff. The 2-minute rule is really when you're processing new incoming. You're dealing with email, you're dealing with a thought, you're dealing with your meeting notes and so forth. And that's when you want to do it because otherwise it goes back into your head, or you're trying to keep track of it, and it takes longer to keep track of it than to actually finish it. So it's not like wasting your life. And by the way, there are worse ways to spend your day. Even if you just did a whole bunch of 2-minute things, you'd feel great. At least doing that. There are worse ways you can spend your day. So as long as, if you're going to avoid doing stuff, you might as well avoid it doing something useful anyway. So, why not? Yeah.
Thank you very much for all your questions.
And as the final thing, I need to introduce my colleague. Where is he? Jakub Ujewski. Yes. Who's going to give you some information about, by the way, this is my partner, our exclusive company in Poland and actually Central and Eastern Europe for the Getting Things Done training. So, Jakub, let him know.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Just a quick announcement. We are going to have a book signing by David at 10:15 till 11:15. We are located near the networking area. If you look at your badges, there are 4 blue squares, blue rectangles. The longest one is our networking area, and we are located there. So you can find us there. We are also going to have another book signing after the lunch break from 2 p.m. till 3 p.m. And if you have any questions regarding GTD trainings, courses, feel free to approach me. I will be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Bye.